Hello everybody. So today's video is entitled MSTR stock. Of course, I don't get to make a he bought video because he didn't buy, but I get to make an almost there video because Stretch is almost there. Stretch is almost trading at 100. And of course, when that happens, he can ATM on Stretch. Sailor can ATM on Stretch. And of course, the big deal of the day is Bitcoin firmly staying above 80K. It's been, what, about an hour now? Not quite, but almost. And Bitcoin is doing so well. Yesterday we broke 79K. Today we broke 80K today, and of course I believe that's because of optimism, because of the Clarity Act. And if you haven't watched my video, I made a video yesterday about the Clarity Act and what that's going to mean for Bitcoin. Very bullish for things like new capital coming in, like, for example, insurance companies being able to allocate to Bitcoin. I think that could be a huge deal. And of course, a crackdown on price manipulations, shadow orders, spoofing, all of that sort of stuff. If we have regulation on crypto, we may have less forced liquidations, less high limits, like the Binance of the world, what they do. We may have less of these liquidations. And finally, we can see Bitcoin rise back to the level that it should be right now. I still think Bitcoin is way too low at 80,000, way too low. Anyways, talking about strategy, of course, strategy today is behaving as intended, about 1.5 times roughly the performance of Bitcoin. Bitcoin up 2.3%, strategy 3.9%, 1.5 times. That's roughly what it is. Is he ATMing right now? I really hope so. But I'm not too sure anymore when he wants to ATM. He didn't ATM last week. Of course, that was the closing the books quarter. Is he gonna ATM after the earnings? In the next few days? Maybe. I hope so. Right? I should hope so that he ATMs. But if Sailor keeps going all in on STRC, all in on Stretch, it's likely that I'm not gonna get my common ATM that I love so much. But he should, right? At 1.28, that's selling a $100 bill for 128. He makes 28. He should ATM right now. At least that's my take on this. Fear and greed, firmly into the neutral. Very happy about that. Please, let's stay neutral for weeks or months. I want to stay neutral for months. I am in no hurry for the rally. This is, to me, a perfect accumulation zone at this point. No investment advice, of course, on this channel. What else do I want to say? Let me see. Okay, this was yesterday's video. Don't forget, of course, to watch my Clarity Act video from yesterday. Talk about Stretch. I need to talk about Stretch. A few things I need to talk about Stretch. First of all, in yesterday's video, you may remember I talked about what are we going to do if Stretch is tokenized. Like, if Stretch is tokenized, isn't it just a Senti stablecoin on DeFi rails and on tokenized rails? So isn't that the same thing? And of course, we see this already. Stretch on the finance tokenized STRC. So Stretch is already being tokenized. So I already think that the stablecoin debate is moot, because that was, of course, one of the issues with the Clarity Act. People saying, oh, we lost because the banks got to say, oh, we don't get to pay a yield, right? Crypto doesn't give a yield on a dollar stable coin. That's the bill as it is prepared right now. But that might not matter at all if, of course, we, instead of using a dollar stable coin, if we use something like a tokenized Stretch, like a tokenized STRC, right? That might not change at all. And of course, with fractional shares, instead of paying in a dollar stablecoin, just pay, instead of 10 bucks, you pay 1/10, 0.1, right? Shares of STRC, and that's roughly the same thing. So I really think this debate is not that relevant anymore. To me, we lost but one. That's what I said in the comment section yesterday to someone. The Clarity Act is kind of a lost but one. It's like, yeah, okay, you don't get to pay the yield on stablecoins, but we're gonna have tokenized STRC now. That's a pretty big deal to me. And of course, I want to keep talking about this. There's two more things. So you may remember my video about looping. When I talked about looping, I was saying that, of course, some people might find an idea of borrowing against STRC. You buy STRC, 50% your cash, 50% your margin. You use both, and of course, you double your yield by doing that, using margin and using TradFi rails. So that's a pretty big deal. But it turns out people are also doing this in the DeFi world, on the staking networks, right? That Saylor talks about. So you can see STRC, by the way, of course, available on staking networks like Solana, right? Solana, Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, Ethereum, Solana, right? That's where a lot of this tokenized finance live. I also think it's going to be available on Hyperliquid. But the point is, they are also yield farming on STRC, and I want to point out to Saylor highlighting Pendle Intern, which is the creator of this platform, Pendle, which is a DeFi platform. And what they do, from what I understand, is they dissociate the yield from the asset, and they do like a zero coupon asset on one hand, and then they have another asset, and then they use liquidity provider tokens, or like classic DeFi speak, and they're able to get you a yield of 16.47% on your STRC backed tokens. So again, somewhat similar to what one could do on their own when they buy stretch with a little bit of margin included there, right? Somewhat similar. And of course, we're also waiting for the ETFs. There might be ETFs in TradFi that also buy stretch and borrow a little money to increase the yield on stretch. This is all very early. This is all very nascent. But a lot of these yield platforms are very happy to see an instrument like Stretch show up, because of course they do the carry trade on Stretch, and doing the carry trade on Stretch might be kind of the ultimate yield, or the ultimate yield investor, income investors play might be to do a carry on STRC. And I'm just pleased to see it happen both on DeFi rails and on TradFi rails. It's essentially, Stretch is becoming a tsunami at this point. A tsunami. That's kind of what I'm seeing. And of course, when you see the amount of money, for example, STRC on APYX, which is the biggest platform, there's 5 platforms, by the way, that have tokenized STRC. What do you see? You see they have $129 million worth of STRC. That's insane. So really, he created the perfect product. And I'll conclude this video talking about this. I saw a few posts online talking about how Saylor should now pay monthly on the other preferreds. Some people even said we should pay semi-monthly on every preferred. And here's my take on this: is, first of all, semi-monthly is a really great take. I love it very much. That's the best they could do. They could technically do every 3 times a month. They could technically do that, but that would be very inconsistent dividends. They could not be evenly spread across the year, and that's because of a 10-day waiting period and the way the SEC regulates the stuff. So I think semi-monthly is the best they're going to do for STRC. But I also don't think Saylor is going to change the payment schedule on the other preferreds. And why? Why do I not think that? Because I think he's done. I think he's done with the other preferreds. And I've called the other preferreds like STRK. I've been caught calling STRK too good to be true. I've called, and many people argue that at some point STRK might actually become more valuable than MSTR. I think Saylor doesn't want to issue the other preferreds. Saylor likes simplicity. STRC is simplicity for Saylor. It's the iPhone moment for Saylor. So I think the other preferreds, they're gonna trade on the secondary market. People are gonna buy it from each other. But I think he's done issuing the other preferreds. That's mostly what I think. I think his focus is entirely on STRC. And so if he's done with the other preferreds, of course he's not going to make changes to the other preferreds. That's not the priority. And Saylor is known for having extreme focus on an issue, right? Early years, he was extreme focus on Bitcoin. Now he has extreme focus on STRC and digital credit. And I think that's the way it's going to go going forward. So that's just my take on some of the news. Of course, tomorrow is the big day. Tomorrow is earnings day, and I will be making perhaps 2 videos about that tomorrow. We'll see. So anyways, this was not investment advice. This is not financial advice. This is only entertainment. I'm hoping you were entertained. Please like, please subscribe, follow me on Patreon, follow me on X. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.